The opulent star cruiser floated through the endless black, its hull shimmering with reflected starlight. Inside, chaos unfurled in jagged bursts, alarms howled and crimson emergency lights pulsed along the corridors, painting every surface in frantic red. Marcus Hale crawled, breath ragged, through a maintenance duct barely wider than his shoulders. His face was smeared with blood from shallow gashes, a trap he'd triggered moments before. Razor filaments that had snapped across his skin. The sting lingered, but his mind cataloged pain as data, not distraction. Every muscle was taut, prepared to strike, but he held back. He was bait tonight, not prey. A hush, a whisper of movement so subtle the air itself seemed to pause. The shadows stretched as something glided behind him, barely touching metal. "Marcus, you taste of adrenaline tonight," purred a voice, lilting and musical, the words dancing with a predator's delight. "Lyra." He didn't look back, forcing himself forward, sweat beading at his brow. There was no room for fear, only focus. He reached the end of the duct and dropped soundlessly into the auxiliary engine bay. The space was a maze of pipes, valves, and hissing steam. Shadows ruled here, pooling in every corner. Marcus pressed himself against cold metal, drawing in shallow breaths. Above, a vent cover slid aside with feline grace, and Lyra landed behind him, silent as a falling feather. She stood tall, her silhouette elegant and dangerous, a vision of predatory beauty. Blue hair, vivid even in the ruddy light, was drawn into a severe braid, and atop her head, delicate feline ears twitched, adorned with silver cuffs that glinted with every movement. Her skin was pale and perfect, her face an oval canvas with high cheekbones and lips pressed into a half-smile. But it was her eyes, icy blue, impossibly sharp, that captured every nuance, every tremor. She circled him, never breaking her gaze, a single claw tracing the line of his jaw. "Surrendering already?" she teased, the words soft but edged. Her tail swayed behind her, betraying coiled tension. Marcus lifted his hands, palms open in mock defeat. "Looks that way." Lyra's fingers lingered over his chest, feeling for the steady, unflinching pulse beneath his shirt. Her touch was searching, almost gentle, but there was a pressure beneath it, testing, not comforting. "You're not broken," she murmured, voice thoughtful. "Not even close." "No," he answered, voice low, gaze locked on hers. With a flick of her wrist, she produced energy cuffs. The bands clicked shut around his wrists, warm at first, then humming with restraint. She pressed closer, guiding him through the labyrinthine corridors. At every turn, her touch was there, a hand on his shoulder, a claw at his side, steering him with a force that was never quite rough, never quite tender. His mind raced, mapping the route, logging every detail. They reached the lift. Inside, the walls gleamed coldly, amplifying the thump of his heart. Lyra pressed him against the back wall, her blue eyes unblinking. "Why aren't you trembling?" she demanded, her fingers tracing the fresh wounds she had given him, lingering on the red welts. "Curiosity," he replied evenly, refusing to drop his gaze. She searched his face, as if trying to decode him, her own features unreadable. The lift chimed and the doors opened onto a sterile prep suite. White walls, bright lights, the faint tang of antiseptic in the air. Lyra barked a command. "Undress." Her tone was clinical, but her eyes were anything but. He peeled off his shirt and undershirt, exposing a lattice of scars. Old burns, knife cuts, a bullet wound gone pink and shiny. She circled him, gaze cataloging every mark, her fingers tracing a line over a recent wound on his ribs. "Special ops," she noted, pausing as if waiting for confirmation. Marcus shrugged, deflecting. "Cargo accident. Maintenance deck." Her ears flicked, betraying skepticism. Liar. But she moved on, activating a medical scanner. Its blue light swept over his body, humming softly. She stepped back, arms folded, eyes never leaving him. "Here are the rules," she said. "Once the pursuit begins, you're quarry. Survive, and you're a trophy. Fail." Her voice caught, just for a heartbeat, and something flickered in her eyes. Pain or doubt. "You understand?" "I do." Marcus met her gaze. "But you seem more unsettled than me." She scowled, hiding the tremor in her hands by reaching for the scanner's readout. "You don't fear death?" she pressed, voice sharp. He held her gaze, unblinking. "Do you?" For a moment her mask slipped. Vulnerability flickered in those blue eyes, gone as quickly as it came. "I'm not the one facing oblivion." "Neither am I," he said. The space between them seemed to contract, tension thickening, drawing them close. Marcus lowered his voice. Earnest. "I want to know you, Lyra. Maybe as much as you want to know me." Her tail lashed the air, uncertainty clouding her features. "How do you know my name?" she snapped, suddenly defensive. "You said it during the chase," he replied. "You whispered it. Maybe you didn't realize." She shook her head, confusion and agitation warring in her eyes. No, I didn't." Her movements grew restless, the rigidity of protocol battling with a flicker of memory. "Arena prep," she muttered, voice brittle as if repeating a mantra to ground herself. Without another word, she strode from the room, footsteps echoing down the corridor. Marcus listened, counting seconds. She was gone longer than he expected. When Lyra returned, she looked smaller somehow, her posture rigid, hands trembling as she assembled a tray of enhancement vials. Her motions were practiced, but shaky, each movement betraying strain. She uncapped a vial, pressed it to her skin, and injected. The drugs hit her hard, her eyes dilated, her body convulsed, and she collapsed to her knees, clutching at the table, breath ragged. Marcus sprang forward, energy cuffs now dead. Her distraction had shut them down. He knelt beside her, catching her as she buckled, her breath coming in gasps. "They erased me," she choked, the words ripped from somewhere deep and wounded. "They took my life, and gave me this." Marcus held her hand, anchoring her. "I'll help you remember, Lyra. I promise." She clung to his hand, knuckles white, desperate for truth. The first crack in her programming. Marcus moved with a silent urgency, hands steady despite the tremor of adrenaline running through his veins. Lyra lay half-curled on the medbay cot, her blue hair a tangle, silver cuffs glinting. Her breathing had steadied, but uncertainty shadowed her eyes. Marcus glanced at her, offered a reassuring nod, then turned to the medical corps' access panel. He slid open the compartment and connected his slim datapad with a cable that snaked around his wrist. Code cascaded across the screen. The medical corps' firewall was not human, its structure alien, logic bending and recursive. But Marcus's training had prepared him for worse. He bypassed the false ports, slipped through a gate disguised as a diagnostic subroutine, and hit the kernel. Security protocols coiled, striking with needle-fine queries. Marcus countered with a mimic virus, bought himself precious seconds. His breath slowed, mind narrowing to a pinprick focus. He dug deeper, tracing encrypted paths, each step revealing fragments, names, ages, biometric data. He hesitated, throat tight, as the pattern emerged. Children, dozens of them. The files were incomplete, but the truth crystallized. Lyra, once a child with a different name, had been abducted from a frontier colony at the age of 7. Neural rewriting, cybernetic augmentation. Dozens of children, dozens of stolen lives repurposed into hunters for the Syndicate's games. Behind him, Lyra trembled, knuckles white against the cot's edge. Did you find it? Her voice was barely above a whisper, fragile and raw. Marcus turned, gaze somber. I found your origin file. You were taken when you were 7, from a place called Meridia Outpost. You had a name then, a different one. What was it? Her eyes glistened, desperate. His expression hardened with regret. They purged the names. The records are fragments. Dates, medical scans, some childhood photos with faces blurred out. They erased your identity. A shudder ran through her. Then I'm nothing. Just their machine. He stepped forward, kneeling beside her. You're still in there, he said fiercely. I saw it. The way you hesitated when you could have finished me, the way you touched my hand, searching for something familiar. Those aren't reflexes, Lyra. That's you. She looked away, blinking rapidly as if fighting tears she didn't quite know how to shed. You didn't surrender by accident, did you? She asked, voice trembling. No. Marcus shook his head. I came for you. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The distant hum of the ship and the pulse of emergency lights filled the silence. My assignment was to infiltrate this hunting syndicate, Marcus admitted, voice low. I was supposed to get close to the overseer and sabotage the operation. But when I learned what they'd done to you, and to all those children, my mission changed. Lyra stared at him, searching his face for any trace of deceit. Why? She asked finally. Why risk everything for a stranger? He reached for her hand, brushing his thumb over her knuckles, grounding her. Because I know you, he said softly. Not your past, maybe not even your name, but I know who you are beneath all this programming and pain. She drew a shaky breath. For the first time, her heart pounded not from fear, but from something deeper, unfamiliar. Marcus's voice gentled. We can break your conditioning. Memories are linked to emotion. If you feel something strong enough, it might unlock what they tried to erase. Her lips parted, uncertain. How? Close your eyes, he said, lifting his hand to her cheek. His touch was warm, steady. Remember this feeling, not with your mind. Let your body remember. Lyra obeyed, lashes fluttering shut. She focused on the warmth of his hand, the steady thrum of his pulse through his thumb. Images surfaced, quick, elusive. Sunlight glinting off a garden path, the scent of flowers, a small hand weaving petals into her braid. Laughter, the ghost of a woman's voice, gentle and safe. I see, she breathed. A garden, sunlight, someone weaving flowers into my hair. I almost remember her face. Keep going, Marcus urged, his tone coaxing. She tried, but a spike of pain lanced through her skull. She gasped, clutching her head, and the memory fractured, dissolving into static. It hurts, she whispered, eyes wet. Something's blocking me. He wrapped his arms around her, drawing her in. Then we make new memories, he murmured, strong enough to anchor the old. Every time you feel something real, you reclaim a piece of yourself. The tension between them thickened, electricity crackling in the small room. Lyra's programming screamed that this was wrong, that closeness was dangerous, that affection was forbidden. But her heart and body ached for the contact, the affirmation. She looked up at him, confusion and hope warring in her eyes. What if I lose myself? I'll find you, Marcus promised. He cupped her jaw, leaning in. Let me show you. His lips met hers, gentle at first, seeking permission. Lyra stiffened, instinct warring with longing, but the taste of him, the salt of sweat, the promise in his kiss, melted her defenses. She leaned into him, responding with a hunger that startled them both. His hands slipped to her waist, hers twining around his neck. The kiss deepened, need building, until her predatory instincts blurred, yielding to something far more vulnerable. They came together on the narrow cot, urgency giving way to discovery. Marcus traced her scars, whispering that they were proof of survival, not shame. Lyra let her claws retract, surrendering to sensation. In his embrace, she felt the flicker of her true self, someone gentle, someone loved. Each caress, each gasp drew out pieces of a life lost but not destroyed. Afterwards, the room was quiet except for the steady hum of the ship and the mingled rhythms of their breath. Lyra lay in Marcus's arms, her head on his chest, tracing patterns on his skin with a clawless fingertip. Her mind floated, peaceful for the first time in years. "Tell me what you remember," Marcus said quietly, his voice a balm. She smiled faintly. "My mother's voice. The garden. She called me." Her breath caught, a nickname blooming on her tongue. "Mira? She called me Mira." The word tasted like sunlight, like hope. He kissed her temple, marveling at the peace in her face. "That's a start." She closed her eyes, savoring the memory. For once, remembering brought comfort, not agony. The moment was fragile. Reality pressed in. Lyra's ears twitched, alert. "The hunt," she said softly. "It begins in a few hours. If we're here when the call goes out, the Overseer will unleash the other hunters." Marcus nodded, his mind already moving through possibilities. "We need to get off the ship." "Escape pods?" She shook her head. "Each pod requires 2 codes. One from the lead hunter, one from the Overseer. I can provide mine, but we have to get the Overseer to enter his," Marcus finished. "We can fake a failed hunt. Make it look like you killed me, collect your trophy, and get close enough to force his hand." Lyra considered, tail flicking in thought. It could work, but there's something else. Her hand trembled as she reached for his. "The enhancement drugs. If I stop, withdrawal will be brutal. I might lose myself again, become the weapon they made me." Marcus squeezed her hand, fierce and steady. "I'll stay with you, Lyra. No matter what happens, I'll remind you who you are. Every time you forget, I'll bring you back." Her eyes shone, emotion raw and unguarded. "Why do you care so much?" "Because I see you," he said simply, "and I'm not leaving." Lyra drew a shuddering breath, then leaned into his touch, letting herself trust, for the first time since childhood. In his arms, hope flickered, stubborn and bright, refusing to die. The arena doors sealed with a hiss, steel teeth locking Marcus inside a cell carved from cold alloy and reinforced transparent steel. Above him, columns of harsh white light spilled down onto the sand, illuminating a space designed for spectacle and slaughter. In the galleries ringing the arena, masked clients lounged in shadows, anticipation buzzing. Cameras tracked every movement, broadcasting the blood sport to a private, hungry audience. Marcus stood motionless in the center of his starting cell, hands at his sides, jaw clenched. He refused to pace, refused to crouch or scan the exits like prey. His eyes were twin points of calm defiance as he stared through the barrier at the emptiness beyond. Far overhead, Lyra prowled the observation deck, every sense stretched taut. The familiar tightness of her armor pressed against her skin, but something inside her had shifted. No longer a puppet on a string, she felt her own heart pounding, her own decisions rising in the space between memory and rage. From the command dais, the Overseer watched her, expecting ruthless efficiency, a flawless hunt. The clients murmured, impatient for the show. A soft chime. Lyra's calm crackled with the Overseer's voice. "Begin, Hunter Lyra. Make it quick for our guests." She lifted her chin, eyes narrowing. "Acknowledged," she said, then muted the line. She stepped to the edge of the deck, gazing down at Marcus, her target, her rescuer. The crowd's buzz swelled. With a flick of her tail, she signaled her approach, letting the cameras catch the feral glint in her eyes. The gates slid open. But Marcus did not run. He stood his ground as the doors to his cell slid aside, arms folded, gaze unblinking. The arena's AI issued a warning. Quarry, initiate movement. Hunt protocol requires evasion. Marcus ignored it. The lights flickered as the system recalibrated. Alarms wailed. Non-compliance detected. Initiating behavioral correction. Automated turrets angled toward him, safeties clicking off. In a single, precise motion, Marcus ducked behind a maintenance panel, yanking free a bundle of fiber optic lines. Sparks flew. The turrets jerked, sensors blind. He jammed a wireless spike into the control relay, flooding the arena grid with feedback. All around, security drones spasmed and crashed, spotlights fizzing to darkness. The arena descended into chaos. From the observation deck, the overseer bolted upright. Security breach! Lock down the bridge! He sprinted from the gallery, flanked by panicked guards, leaving clients scrambling in confusion. Lyra moved, silent as moonlight, slipping away from the observation deck and melting into the service corridors. She flowed through shadows, pulse steady, rage simmering in her chest. The overseer would run for the command bridge, desperate to restore order. That was where she needed to be. Down the spiral stairs and through a hatch, she emerged just as the overseer reached the bridge, hands flying over control surfaces. Override arena lockdown. Authorization. Kasari Sigma. He stabbed his palm onto the biometric pad, pulse wild. Before he could finish the sequence, Lyra dropped from the ceiling vent, landing in a crouch behind him. The guards spun, weapons raised, but her claws were already at the overseer's throat, silver tips gleaming. Her tail lashed, eyes blazing with something older than fear, memory, pain, fury. He gaped at her, stunned. Lyra? What? You're programming? Her snarl cut through his words. Give me the code. Her voice was low, layered with the weight of everything he'd stolen. He choked, sweat beading his brow. No, you're not. You can't. I remember everything, she growled, pressing her claws just enough to draw a bead of blood. The children, the garden, my mother's voice, and every moment you tried to erase. The guards opened fire, but she was already moving. She leaped sideways, claws slicing a stun baton from one man's grip before disabling him with a sharp jab to the throat. The other she spared, shoving him aside. She refused to kill. Not anymore. She was not just a weapon. She dragged the overseer to the scanner, forcing his trembling hand to the pad. The security lights flashed green. The code pinged to Marcus's wrist console. She pressed her lips to the comm, voice barely a whisper. 30 seconds. Marcus's reply was quick, steady. Copy. Meet you at the pod. She slipped from the bridge, heart pounding. The chaos she and Marcus had seeded rippled across the ship. Alarms, panicked shouts, systems locked in feedback loops. She raced through the corridors, every step burning with purpose, the overseer's code committed to memory. The escape pod bay was bathed in strobing red light. The hatch slid open with a pneumatic sigh. Marcus stood waiting, eyes searching, relief etched in every line of his face. She staggered to him, the weight of all they'd done settling on her shoulders. He reached for her, but she held herself back for a single trembling breath, her voice raw. I don't see you as prey, or a comrade. You're the one who saved me. The words tumbled out, unstoppable. I love you. Marcus's face softened with something fierce and bright. I love you too, he said, catching her in his arms as the pod sealed, locking out the world. They clung to each other, lips meeting in a kiss that tasted of salt and hope as the escape pod launched, slamming them into the dark between stars. But freedom was not clean. Lyra's body seized, muscles spasming, eyes wide with pain. She convulsed, twisting from Marcus's grasp, her breath coming in gasps. Withdrawal had begun, the enhancements flooding from her system, leaving her mind raw and exposed. The pod's alarm blared. Tractor beam detected. External force engaging. Through the viewport, the star cruiser loomed, massive and merciless. A shimmering blue beam locked onto the pod, dragging it inexorably back toward the ship. Lyra snarled, claws bared, every muscle taut with inner war. Her programming lashed at her mind, cold and absolute. End him. She lunged at Marcus, hands trembling, voice guttural. End him. End the threat. Marcus caught her wrists, his grip unyielding. Lyra, listen to me. You're not a weapon. You're not theirs anymore. He pulled her close, pinning her thrashing body to his chest. She fought him, tears streaming from her eyes, face twisted in agony. I can't stop it. Yes, you can. His voice was soft, implacable. Remember the garden, sunlight on your face, your mother's voice. Mira. Her struggles faltered, fingers curling in his shirt. Mira, she sobbed, the word catching like a lifeline. She called me Mira. Marcus cradled her head, rocking her through the storm. Hold on to that. I'm here. I'm not letting go. The ship's hull grew closer, the tractor beam humming louder, but Lyra's eyes found his, brimming with tears, burning with the fight for her own soul. The battle inside her raged, programming against memory, darkness against hope, as the pod was drawn inexorably back toward the place where it all began. Marcus refused to let go. Lyra's body bucked in his arms, her claws slicing the air, eyes wild with predatory gold. The pod's hull shuddered as the tractor beam intensified, rattling them like dice in a cosmic fist. But Marcus only tightened his grip, catching her wrists before she could land a blow. Her strength was staggering, more than human. Rage, withdrawal, and programming merging into a single destructive force. He met her gaze, desperate, unyielding. Fight it! Lyra, you have to fight it. Remember who you are. She thrashed, face contorted with pain. Her tail lashed against the pod wall, fangs bared, a guttural cry ripping from her throat. They're burning my mind, she sobbed, voice thick with agony. I can't. He braced himself as she drove forward, all instinct and violence, but he refused to flinch. You can, he shouted, his voice cracking. They don't own you. You are not theirs. Remember the garden. Your mother's voice. Mira, Sira, whatever your name, you are not a weapon. For a moment she froze, caught between programming and memory. Her claws pressed against his neck, trembling, but she didn't strike. Marcus saw the flicker in her eyes, confusion, pain, longing, and acted on instinct. He closed the distance between them, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss fierce and unguarded. It was not gentle, not perfect, but raw and overflowing with everything he had. Love, hope, memory, promise. He poured every fragment of their shared moments, every whisper of her lost childhood, into that embrace. Lyra's body stiffened, then slowly softened. Her claws retracted, hands unclenching. Her breath caught, a sob breaking free as she sagged against him. The storm inside her paused, the rage and pain losing their edge, replaced by something fragile and real. She pulled back, blinking tears from her eyes. Her voice, when it came, was the barest whisper. I remember. She touched her temple as if confirming the truth. My real name was Sira. My mother called me Sira. She used to braid flowers into my hair. I can hear her singing. Marcus cupped her face, his own eyes wet. Hello, Sira, he said softly, reverently. A tremor ran through her, Not from the programming, but from choice. I choose this, she breathed. I choose you. I choose freedom. Not for them. Not for anyone else. Just for us. Her resolve crystallized. She wrenched free from his arms, not to escape, but to act. Crossing the cramped pod in 2 strides, Sierra slammed her fist into the emergency locator panel, shattering it. Sparks sprayed as she ripped out the tracking array. "They won't find us," she promised, her voice laced with steel. She dropped into the pilot's seat, hands flying over the controls, setting a course for the nearest human outpost, a speck of safety in a universe of predators. Alarms blared as her implants began to fail, systems deactivating one by one. The pain came in waves, sharper than anything she'd endured before, but it was her own. She gritted her teeth, riding out each surge, sweat slicking her brow. She was free, aching, frightened, but free. Marcus slid beside her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders, lending her his strength. "How do you feel?" he asked, voice rough but gentle. Sierra leaned into him, letting her head rest on his shoulder. "Frightened," she admitted, "but free. For the first time, I'm not afraid of who I'll become." She laughed, a broken, beautiful sound. "There's pain, but it's mine. It means I'm real." The pod lurched, then broke free from the tractor beam with a final wrench. The stars outside warped and blurred. Sierra's trembling hand gripped the hyperspace lever. "Ready?" Marcus smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "With you, always." She pulled the lever. The pod surged, stars stretching into streaks as they leapt into hyperspace, severing the last tether to captivity. Sierra collapsed against him, her body racked by tremors. The pain from her deactivating implants radiated from her spine, every nerve ending burning. Marcus gathered her up, holding her through each wave, whispering to her, grounding her. He stroked her hair, reminded her of every small joy, her mother's song, the scent of flowers, the garden sunlight. Each word was an anchor, each touch a lifeline. She clung to him, sobbing and laughing at once, the storm inside her ebbing with every heartbeat. For the first time in years, she let herself hope. Marcus promised her quietly, over and over, "I'm here. We'll discover who you are together. I'll help you remember everything, every piece they tried to take." He held her close as the pod hurtled toward freedom, his love a shield against the past, against pain, against the darkness that still hunted them. Together, they would find the light. 6 months later, Sierra knelt in the garden behind their cottage, her hands sunk deep in the fragrant, dark soil. She pressed her fingers around the slender roots of a young lily, coaxing it upright, then smoothed the earth with gentle, practiced motions. Sunlight dappled her arms, freckles blooming on skin that had once been as pale as moonlight, her blue hair falling loose down her back. The air was filled with birdsong and the faint, comforting scent of dinner wafting from the kitchen window. The cottage itself stood sturdy and inviting, blue shutters flung wide to catch the breeze, painted to match the shade from her oldest, dearest memories. Inside, Marcus moved with easy purpose, humming softly as he chopped fresh herbs. The rhythm of the knife and the sizzle from the stove were familiar and grounding, every small sound a reminder that peace could be real. Occasionally, he glanced through the window, watching Sierra among her flowers. She moved with a grace that no longer owed anything to predatory instinct, her steps light, her posture relaxed, her eyes bright with contentment. "The lilies are blooming," Sierra called, her voice ringing with warmth. There was no trace of the hard edge she'd carried for so many years, only delight, honest and uncomplicated. Marcus wiped his hands on a towel and stepped out onto the back porch, letting the screen door creak behind him. He crossed the small patch of lawn and joined her on the old wooden bench they had sanded and painted together in the first weeks after their arrival. He smiled at her, his gaze lingering on the streak of soil across her cheek. "They're beautiful," he said, brushing a stray leaf from her hair. "I didn't think anything could grow this fast." She laughed, tucking her knees up and wrapping her arms around them. "My mother used to say lilies were stubborn. If you gave them a little sunlight and kindness, they'd surprise you." She reached for a blossom, twirling it between her fingers. "She taught me how to braid flowers into my hair. I used to sit at her feet while she worked in the garden. I'd close my eyes and pretend I was a princess in a world made of sunlight and petals." Marcus leaned closer, his arm draped behind her shoulders. "I'd like to see that someday, your hair full of lilies." His words were gentle, meant only for her. "Your memories? Do they still hurt?" Syrah shook her head, a small, luminous smile curving her lips. "Not anymore. They used to burn, like something sharp and broken inside me. Now they feel like treasures I'd lost and found again." She paused, closing her eyes as she let the memory unfold. "I can still hear her singing sometimes. When the wind's right, it's almost as if she's here." Marcus brushed his thumb along her knuckles, steady and reassuring. "You're making new memories now. That's what matters." She turned her head, blue eyes shining. "With you. Only with you." They sat together, watching the late afternoon sun dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in bands of gold and rose. The quiet was deep and true, broken only by the distant sound of the ocean and the soft clatter of plates inside the kitchen. After a time, Marcus shifted, pulling a folded data tablet from his pocket. He placed it on the bench between them. "There's news," he said, anticipation flickering in his voice. "The Colonial Council approved our proposal. They're forming a team, our team, to track down the other hunting syndicates, to find the others who were taken." Syrah's breath caught, her hands tightening around the lily stem. "Other children like me." Her voice was soft, trembling with hope and dread. "Children who became weapons." Marcus nodded. "We'll find them. We'll give them the same choice you had." He squeezed her hand, eyes earnest. "It won't be easy, Syrah. Some might not want to remember. Some might be afraid, or lost so deep they can't see a way out." Syrah leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder as the first stars winked into the sky. "Then we help them choose. We show them there's more to life than pain and survival." She turned, searching his face. "You taught me that." He smiled, brushing a kiss against her forehead. "You saved yourself, Syrah. I was just there to catch you when you fell." She studied him, wonder dawning all over again at the man who had risked everything, his mission, his safety, his heart, to save her. She traced the line of his jaw, memorizing the gentle curve of his smile, the warmth in his eyes. "I used to dream of gardens," she said softly, "even when I didn't know why. I'd wake up with the scent of flowers in my nose, and I'd ache for something I couldn't name." "Maybe your real self was holding on," Marcus said. "Maybe you never truly forgot who you were." A breeze lifted, carrying the scent of lilies and fresh earth. Syrah tilted her face up, watching as the night deepened, stars multiplying across the indigo sky. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for loving me before I could love myself." Marcus turned her gently to face him. "Thank you for fighting your way back, for giving us this." His fingers traced her cheek, memorizing the peace he found there. She leaned in and kissed him beneath the gathering stars, a kiss full of gratitude, promise, and everything she had reclaimed. Around them, the garden bloomed in the dusk, every flower a testament to survival and new beginnings, every breath a reminder that the future was theirs to shape. Night settled softly over Aurora Colony, the sky a deep velvet scattered with pinpricks of starlight. Syrah and Marcus sat side by side on the weathered garden bench, their knees brushing, bare feet nestled in dew-cool grass. The hush that filled the world was gentle, broken only by the distant chirr of nightbirds and the faint rustle of leaves stirred by a breeze. All around them, the garden they'd coaxed from raw earth glowed faintly. Moonlight silvered the lilies, cast the roses into pools of shadow and light, and touched Syrah's hair with a sheen of blue fire. She watched her hands, scarred but steady, fingers laced loosely with Marcus's. Her heart beat calmly now, no longer racing with the old predatory tension. For a long moment she let herself simply exist in this peace, breathing in the scent of soil and growing things, feeling the heat of Marcus's shoulder pressed against her own. Finally she spoke, her voice low but clear in the quiet. "I spent years hunting humans," she said, turning her hand to study the lines of her palm as if they might still hold secrets. "I told myself it was all I could do, all I was made for. But none of that was the real pursuit. Not really." She looked up, her eyes reflecting starlight. "The greatest hunt was finding myself, and I never could have done it without you." Marcus turned toward her, a slow, gentle smile curving his lips. He drew her close, wrapping his arm around her shoulders and tucking her against his side. The steady rise and fall of his chest calmed her further, grounding her in the here and now. "We rescued each other," he said softly, voice rumbling like distant thunder. "You pulled me from the shadows just as surely as I pulled you from the hunt." Syrah closed her eyes, letting the words settle in her bones. "Yes," she breathed, a small, peaceful smile blooming on her face. She pressed her ear against his chest, the steady drum of his heartbeat filling her with a warmth she'd once believed impossible. "This sound, it's home now." They sat in silence, letting the world spin on, neither needing to speak. Above them, the stars shifted and shimmered, and every so often a ship glided across the dark. Navigation lights blinking red and gold, arcing toward destinations unseen. Syrah watched one drift past, a slender silhouette against the sweep of the Milky Way. She wondered who rode inside, what stories they carried. Perhaps there were others like she once was, lost souls, searching for themselves in the cold reaches between the stars. The thought was no longer a source of pain, but of purpose. Tomorrow, she and Marcus would begin their work in earnest. The council's approval meant they would soon leave this quiet garden, setting out to track the remnants of the hunting syndicates, to find and free those still imprisoned by programming and pain. It was a daunting task, one that would require all their strength, patience, and courage. Some survivors would resist, clinging to old identities out of fear. Others might lash out, lost in memories they could barely process. But tonight belonged only to them. Tonight was a pause, a breath between chapters. The garden, lush and fragrant, pressed close on every side, a living cocoon of hope and renewal. Syrah leaned into Marcus, letting her worries fall away for just this moment. "Do you remember," she murmured, "the first time you saw me like this? In the garden, with my hands in the dirt, hair full of petals?" He chuckled, the sound low and affectionate. "I remember thinking you looked more alive than I'd ever seen you, that I'd follow you anywhere." She smiled, tilting her face up so he could see the joy there. "You still would?" "In a heartbeat," he promised, and kissed her forehead, lingering in the warmth between them. They watched the stars in companionable silence, each lost in thought, yet wholly present with one another. Marcus traced small circles on her back, steady and soothing. Syrah let her gaze wander, imagining the futures they might build, worlds where gardens were places of healing, not hiding, where no child would be taken, erased, or remade into a weapon. She sighed, content. It's strange. For so long I thought I would never be anything but what they made me. And now I get to choose every single day. Marcus squeezed her hand. That's what freedom is. Choice, even when it's hard. She nodded, brushing her lips across his shoulder. And love. I never thought I'd get to have this. To be loved, and to love back. It's the best kind of rebellion, isn't it? He laughed softly, joy threading through the sound. The very best. The most important. The moon climbed higher, bathing the garden in silver. The flowers seemed to glow from within, and Sira felt something deep and abiding settle in her chest, a sense of belonging, of being wholly herself. She knew darkness would come again. There would be nightmares, setbacks, and hard days ahead. But she also knew that she would not face them alone. She looked up at Marcus, studied the man who had risked everything for her, who had seen her even when she could not see herself. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." He brushed her cheek with his knuckles, his gaze steady. "Thank you for coming back, for fighting, for choosing me." Above them, another ship slipped through the sky, a tiny beacon moving toward its own tomorrow. Sira watched until it vanished, a small, hopeful ache blooming in her heart for all those still lost. "We'll find them," she said quietly, "and we'll help them choose." Marcus nodded, drawing her in for a soft, lingering kiss. Together. They rested in the garden, entwined among lilies and roses, surrounded by new life, hope, and the promise of a future built on love, memory, and choice. The night wrapped around them, gentle and safe, a beginning at last.